This episode of the AI Daily Deep Dive podcast was researched entirely by the new AI model Gemini Deep Research and is fully AI generated. Today, we're tackling a really fundamental question. It's coming out of this intense U.S.-China competition in artificial superintelligence, or ASI. And the question is, will the nation, with the greater capacity to generate electric energy, will they ultimately come out on top?
Exactly. That's the core issue we're digging into. We're basing this on an essay called Gemini, the Kilowatt Race, which really focuses right in on this.
The kilowatt race, okay.
Yeah, and it makes a pretty compelling case for why energy is now, a crucial factor, maybe even the decisive factor in this whole tech contest.
Right. So let's get straight into it then. What's the basic argument? What's this kilowatt race essay actually saying about energy and ASI?
Well, the central point is that the sheer amount of energy needed for the next level of AI, these incredibly complex models we're already starting to see, it's just massive. So massive, in fact, that a country's ability to reliably supply that electricity could become the ultimate bottleneck, the real choke point in the race to get to ASI first.
A bottleneck. Interesting.
Yeah. So the essay looks closely at the U.S. energy situation, China's energy situation, what their plans are for expansion, building more capacity.
Right.
And it also looks at new tech advancements in making energy and making AI itself more efficient. And then it tries to figure out, okay, is raw energy capacity really going to be the deciding thing?
Gotcha. The essay doesn't just start there, though, does it? It kind of sets the stage, explains how energy suddenly became such a big part of the AI discussion. Where does it trace that back to?
It kicks off with a pretty significant moment, Dr. Eric Schmidt's testimony. This was back in April 2025, before the U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee.
Ah, Schmidt. Okay.
Yeah. The essay uses that testimony as, the spark, the moment that really showed how central energy has become to thinking about AI's future.
And what were the key things Schmidt said that the essay pulls out? Why was that testimony so important?
Well, the essay highlights Schmidt's view that the AI revolution is actually being underhyped. Can you believe it? Underhyped.
Wow.
And his big warning was about the enormous energy demands coming down the pipeline. He threw out some really eye-popping numbers.
Like what?
Like U.S. data centers needing an extra 29 gigawatts by 2027, and then another 67 gigawatts on top of that by 2030.
67 gigawatts.
Just extra.
Just extra. And to make it relatable, Schmidt gave this example. Some planned data centers needed 10 gigawatts. That's the same amount of power as 10 average nuclear power plants.
10 nuclear plants. Just for data center. Wow. Okay, that puts it in perspective. And Schmidt wasn't just talking about the U.S. needing power, was he? There was a geopolitical angle too, right?
Absolutely. The essay really underscores Schmidt's call for energy in all forms. He wasn't just saying it's an industrial challenge. He framed it as a direct geopolitical race. U.S. versus China for AI dominance.
A race for AI supremacy. Exactly. He actually voiced concerns that China might get to superintelligence first. And the essay stresses the really serious national security risks he talked about, like advanced cyber attacks, even biological attacks.
So for Schmidt, it wasn't just about keeping the lights on for servers. It was about national security. What did he suggest the U.S. should do about it?
The essay lays out a few key things from his testimony. He said the U.S. needs to revitalize its innovation power, boost funding for research, and for energy cybersecurity that's important.
Right, protecting the power grid itself.
Definitely. And streamline permitting for energy projects, make it faster. And also embrace high-skilled immigration, get the talent needed. He actually warned that being too restrictive on immigration was hurting the U.S. in this race.
Interesting point about immigration. Did the essay mention other voices backing up this energy AI link?
It did. It brought in Manish Bhatia from Micron Technology. He talked about how crucial advanced memory chips are for AI.
Micron, yeah, big chip maker.
Right. And he estimated Micron's own U.S. energy needs would hit 2 gigawatts by 2040. But he also mentioned wider estimates suggesting maybe 128 gigawatts of new U.S. demand in just the next 5 years.
128 gigawatts in 5 years.
Yeah. And he stressed how sensitive chip manufacturing is to power stability. You can't have fluctuations. So he also called for that all-of-the-above energy strategy and, again, permitting reform.
And wasn't there someone from the energy policy side mentioned too?
Yes, David Turk. He used to be Deputy Secretary of Energy. He really emphasized the economic and national security reasons for keeping AI data centers in the U.S.
Makes sense.
And he pointed to forecasts saying data centers' share of U.S. electricity could jump from about 4.4% in 2023 up to maybe 12% by 2028.
A huge jump.
A huge jump. And one more, Alexander Wang, the founder of Scale AI. He highlighted the intense global competition from China and urged the U.S. to aim for AI dominance, but guided by American values. Things like a national AI data reserve and clear regulations.
Okay, so the first part of this essay really hammers home the point. Energy isn't just incidental to AI, it's becoming central, maybe even the battlefield. So why is AI so hungry for energy? What does the essay say about the demands?
Right, the next section breaks that down. It distinguishes between the energy used for training these big AI models and the energy for inference. That's when the trained model actually does stuff.
Training versus doing. Got it.
Exactly. And training these huge foundation models, the ones underpinning everything, that takes just immense computational power. The essay gives examples, like GPT-3's training run, estimated at around 12,287 megawatt hours, or Llama 3 needing over half a gigawatt hour for one training cycle.
Those numbers hard to even wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But the essay says it's not just the training, right?
Yeah.
Using the AI day-to-day also adds up.
That's a key point. Inference, doing one specific task, like the example of Llama 65B writing a short essay, that uses a tiny amount of energy, like 0.00037 kilowatt hours.
That's tiny.
But the sheer scale, billions of queries, billions of interactions, it adds up massively. The essay notes a single ChatGPT query might use roughly 10 times the energy of a standard Google search.
10 times. Wow. Okay, multiply that by millions or billions.
Exactly. It becomes a huge cumulative demand.
And the hardware itself. The chips powering all this must draw a lot of juice, too.
Oh, absolutely. The essay talks about the specialized chips and NVIDIA's GPUs, Google's TPUs. These things have, billions of transistors packed in, up to 208 billion in some cases.
Incredible density.
And they consume a lot of power, maybe up to 1,200 watts per chip. Then you put thousands of these into hyperscale data centers.
And those centers themselves need power.
Right, and the power density per rack is going up from maybe 8 kilowatts now towards 30, even 50 kilowatts per rack by 2027. That creates massive challenges just getting the power to the racks, and even more for cooling it all down. Cooling can be 30–40% of a data center's entire energy use.
So cooling is a huge overhead. It seems like a perfect storm of factors driving up demand. What are the main drivers the essay identifies?
It points to a few key things. One, the AI models just keep getting bigger and more complex. Two, AI is spreading everywhere across all sorts of industries, so usage is exploding.
Right.
And three, governments are pouring money into building their own sovereign AI capabilities, national projects.
Makes sense.
The essay also mentions the Jevons paradox. It's this idea that even if AI gets more energy efficient per task, the fact that it's cheaper and easier to use means we just use it more, so total energy consumption might still go up.
Ah, the rebound effect. Interesting.
Yeah, and then it rolls out projections from, everyone. The IEA, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, Deloitte, IDC, RAND, Institute for Progress.
What's the consensus?
Pretty much universal agreement. Global data center electricity demand is set to double, maybe even quadruple by 2030. And AI is the biggest single reason why.
Doubling or quadrupling globally, that's enormous. What about the U.S. and China specifically? How are they positioned for this surge?
Well, the essay highlights an IEA projection that data centers could account for almost half of all U.S. electricity demand growth by 2030.
Half the growth, just from data centers.
Yeah. And another point it makes is that AI processing alone might end up using more power than the entire U.S. energy-intensive manufacturing sector.
More than all heavy industry. That's staggering.
It is. Estimates put data centers at maybe 8% to 12% of total U.S. electricity use by 2030. And meeting that could require something like $720 billion just in grid investment in the U.S.
Okay, what about China?
China's data center energy use is already growing fast, about a quarter of the global total recently. And with their big national AI strategy and digital infrastructure push, their AI-related demand is expected to surge too.
So both are facing huge increases.
Definitely. The essay really flags this potential collision course. AI compute demand growing exponentially, while energy infrastructure tends to grow much more slowly. Who can bridge that gap faster?
That's the core question.
And it even touches on the idea that the difference between training energy needs and inference energy needs could lead to specialization, like training powerhouses, where energy is cheap and plentiful, and maybe inference efficiency leaders elsewhere.
Fascinating strategic angle. Okay, so that sets the stage for the energy demand side. Now, how does the essay compare the current energy supply situation in the U.S. and China? What are their strengths and weaknesses right now?
Right. Section 3 dives into that. For the U.S. in 2023-2024, the mix was dominated by natural gas, 41–43%, Renewables were next, around 21–25%, with wind and solar together actually surpassing coal now.
Renewables beating coal. Interesting.
Yeah. Nuclear is significant too, 18–19%. Coal is down to maybe 15–16%. The essay mentions total generation projected growth, mostly solar and batteries expected in new capacity soon.
But it's not all smooth sailing for the U.S. grid.
No, definitely not. The essay points to major challenges. The big one is the aging transmission grid, that $720 billion investment need we mentioned. That's largely for transmission upgrades.
Okay.
Plus, reliability risks, especially during extreme weather. NERC flags these. But the critical constraints highlighted are permitting and grid connection bottlenecks.
The infamous permitting delays.
Exactly. It can take a decade or more for major new transmission lines. And in hotspots like Northern Virginia, companies might wait up to 7 years just to get connected to the grid. That's a huge drag.
7 years. Wow. Okay, how does China compare currently?
China's profile is quite different, still very heavily reliant on coal, 60–62%. But the growth in renewables is just staggering, up to 36–38% in 2023–24.
That's a huge share already.
It is. Wind and solar specifically are maybe 18–19% combined. Hydro is significant too, around 13%. Nuclear is smaller, about 5%. Natural gas plays a much smaller role than in the U.S.
And the scale in China.
It's just immense. World's largest energy consumer. Installed capacity was over 300 gigawatts by end of 2024, growing super fast.
Yeah.
They added record amounts of solar and wind in 2024 alone, like 277 gigawatts of solar.
277 gigawatts of solar in 1 year.
In 1 year. They basically blew past their 2030 wind and solar target 6 years early. And crucially, they've invested heavily in building the world's biggest ultra-high voltage, or UHV, transmission grid to move all that power around.
That UHV grid seems like a major asset. Does China face grid challenges too?
Oh, for sure. Integrating all those variable renewables, wind and solar is tough. They need more flexibility, like storage and demand response. And sometimes there are mismatches, power plants built where the transmission lines aren't quite ready yet.
So summing up the comparison, U.S. versus China, current energy strengths and weaknesses for AI.
Okay, so the essay paints it like this. U.S. strengths are its innovation ecosystem, lots of natural gas, a strong nuclear base. Weaknesses, actually building big stuff, especially transmission because of permitting hell.
Right. And China.
China's strengths, massive scale, incredible speed of deployment, especially for renewables and nuclear, plus that UHV grid. Weaknesses. Still heavily reliant on coal, grid needs reforms for flexibility, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of a lag in the absolute cutting edge of AI research itself, though they're catching up fast.
What about cost? Does that play a role?
The essay touches on it. Industrial electricity costs in China are kind of mid-range globally. U.S. costs vary a lot by region, but are often lower than China's. But China can also use pricing strategically. Directing power where the government wants it.
And the underlying motivation.
Yeah.
Energy security looks different in both places.
Very different. In the U.S., it's tangled up with climate policy, economic opportunities, but also lots of political fighting. In China, it's seen as a core national security issue, reducing reliance on imports, dealing with pollution, driving a much more unified political push.
So U.S. is market-driven flexibility. China is more brute force capacity building.
That's a good way the essay summarizes it, yeah. Market flexibility versus brute force scale and speed.
Okay, that sets the scene for the present. Now, looking at the expansion race, how are the U.S. and China planning to fuel the future, especially for AI?
Right. The next part looks at their expansion plans. For the U.S., the big driver is the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. Lots of long-term tax credits for clean energy. The goal is ambitious. Triple renewable capacity by 2030.
Triple renewables by 2030. That's big.
It is. Projections show strong growth, especially record solar additions expected, big wind targets too, and there's this renewed interest in nuclear.
We hear a lot about SMRs, small modular reactors.
Exactly. The essay mentions the Vogtle plant finally finishing in Georgia, but yeah, a big push for SMRs and advanced reactors. There's Department of Energy funding, work on new fuel types like HALEU.
HALEU, yeah.
And this idea of putting SMRs right next to data centers is gaining traction. There's even a federal goal to maybe triple U.S. nuclear capacity by 2050.
Triple nuclear too. Ambitious. What about the grid itself?
Modernization efforts are underway, funded by the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law. Over $10 billion through programs like GRAP, trying to speed things up with state cooperation too. And energy storage is booming batteries, driven by falling costs and state mandates. Big growth expected there.
But the challenges remain.
Oh, yeah. The essay really hammers this. Permitting and building long-distance transmission is still the Achilles heel. Permitting paralysis, they call it. It really affects the speed to power. Plus, political uncertainty always hangs over U.S. energy policy, and just ensuring the grid stays reliable as demand and renewables both grow is a huge task.
Okay, so lots of ambition, but execution challenges in the U.S. What about China's expansion strategy?
China's approach is very state-led, driven by their 5-year plans. As we said, they already smashed their renewable targets for the current plan and are way ahead on their 2030 goals.
On track to dominate global renewables.
Projections say they'll account for over half of global renewable capacity by 2030. That record solar and wind build-out continues, massively supported by their dominance in manufacturing solar panels, wind turbines, batteries.
They make everything.
Pretty much. And their nuclear expansion is incredibly aggressive, aiming for 70 gigawatts by the end of 2025, potentially 150 new reactors by 2035, maybe 240 gigawatts total by 2050.
Yeah.
They have dozens under construction right now.
150 new reactors, that's huge.
It's huge. They're deploying their own designs, like the Hualong one, leading in next-gen stuff like Generation EV reactors, SMRs, and they explicitly want to export this nuclear tech.
A global nuclear player. And the grid.
Continued massive investment, expanding that UHV network. The state grid spends enormous sums annually. They have action plans for a new type power system, smarter grids, large-scale storage, integrating EVs. They've already beaten their 2025 storage target and raised it.
So China's drivers are still energy security, growth, pollution.
Exactly. Energy security, economic growth, cleaning up the air, plus meeting climate goals. It all aligns for them.
So comparing the expansion plans, U.S. market-driven versus China state-led.
Yeah, the essay contrasts them again. U.S. market-driven relies on private investment. State initiatives play a big role. It's potentially more innovative, maybe, but fragmented and slower on big infrastructure. China, state-led, much faster deployment, hits targets with more certainty, benefits from manufacturing dominance.
China spends more overall on this transition.
Historically, yes, significantly more, though the essay notes the gap is narrowing thanks to things like the IRA. And on nuclear, it contrasts the U.S. focus on potentially game-changing but riskier SMRs versus China just building proven large reactors at scale while also doing advanced demos.
Okay, so both are racing to build, but in very different ways. Now, the essay shifts to technology itself. Could breakthroughs in AI efficiency or new energy tech change the whole equation?
That's the focus of the 5th section. Could tech advancements basically make the raw amount of energy less important? Could it disrupt this whole kilowatt race?
Let's start with AI chips. How can they become more efficient?
Performance per watt is the key metric here. The essay notes NVIDIA keeps improving, but it also highlights alternative approaches like Cerebra's and their wafer scale engine.
The giant chip.
Yeah, the giant chip with like 900,000 cores. Cerebra's claims better performance per watt, better scaling. Some studies suggest it could be like 22 times more energy efficient than GPUs for certain AI jobs.
22 times. That's a big difference.
Potentially, yeah. And others like Google with TPUs, GraphCore with IPUs, they're all pushing efficiency hard.
What about totally different ways of computing? More radical ideas.
The essay mentions 2 big ones. First, neuromorphic computing. Brain-inspired chips.
Like how our brains work.
Kind of. The idea is to put processing and memory physically closer together, reduce data shuffling, which uses a ton of energy, potential for huge efficiency gains orders of magnitude. Intel's Loihi, IBM's True North are examples.
So that could slash data center needs.
Could do, yeah, especially by enabling more processing out at the edge, closer to sensors and devices. But the essay cautions there are big hurdles. Software is hard, scaling up is tough, supply chains aren't there yet.
Okay, what's the second radical idea?
Optical computing. Using photons light instead of electrons.
Computing with light beams?
Basically, yeah. Potential for higher speeds, much less energy loss. Think photonic integrated circuits, or PICs. Recent work even uses LEDs, but again, challenges. Stability, integrating with normal chips, manufacturing at scale. Still early days for widespread use.
So hardware improvements are one angle. What about the software, the algorithms? Can AI just get smarter about using energy?
Absolutely crucial. The essay talks about optimizing the software side. One technique is quantization.
Quantization.
Reducing the numerical precision. Using 8-bit numbers instead of 32-bit, for example. Less data, less memory, faster computation, less energy. Mentions something called Quorot.
Okay.
Then there's model compression. Things like pruning, cutting out unimportant bits of the neural network,
All right.
or knowledge distillation, training a small, efficient model to act like a big, powerful one. Basically making the AI models leaner.
Smarter, smaller models.
Right. And just ongoing research into designing AI architectures and training methods that are inherently more efficient from the start. Lots of work happening there.
Okay, so AI could get much more efficient. What about the energy source itself? Any game-changing new energy technologies on the horizon?
This is where it gets really interesting, but also, further out. First up, fusion power.
The Holy Grail.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Replicating the sun. The essay mentions the NIF breakthrough scientific break-even and tons of private money, over $6 billion, pouring into fusion startups now.
Like Commonwealth Fusion and Helium.
Exactly. ADARE, the big international project, Commonwealth aiming for net energy gains soon. Helium has that really ambitious goal for a 50 milliW plant by 2028. The potential market is insane. $40 trillion maybe? But
Big butt.
big but. Huge science and engineering challenges still exist. Many are skeptical about those aggressive timelines. It's promising, but not guaranteed, and certainly not tomorrow.
Okay, fusion is long-term. What else? Advanced nuclear.
Yes, specifically molten salt reactors, MSRs. The essay highlights their potential pluses. Higher temps mean more efficiency, potentially safer designs, less waste. Can use different fuels, like thorium.
Hey, China's leading in MSRs.
The essay says China is pushing hard on MSR development. Lots of R&D elsewhere, too. US, Canada, France, Russia. But again, challenges. Materials that can handle the corrosive salts, new safety standards, fuel supply chains. Commercial deployment is probably mid-2030s at the earliest.
So, also not immediate relief. Any other big energy ideas?
Enhanced geothermal systems, or EGS.
Geothermal, like Iceland. But enhanced.
Kind of. Traditional geothermal needs natural hot water or steam near the surface. EGS aims to tap heat much deeper down, in hot, dry rock. You drill down, fracture the rock to create pathways, circulate water to bring heat up.
Sounds complex.
It is, but the potential resource is vast. The DOE thinks there's over 5,000 gigawatts worth just in the U.S. Companies like Fervo Energy are making breakthroughs in drilling and making the underground reservoirs work better.
So, potentially lots of clean, reliable power.
That's the promise: clean, firm, baseload power. The DOE has a geothermal shot trying to get costs down significantly by 2035, but challenges remain. High upfront drilling costs and risks, potential for minor earthquakes, permitting hurdles, getting transmission lines built to remote sites. Commercial liftoff is maybe late 2020s, early 2030s.
Okay, so lots of potential future energy sources, but nothing guaranteed to arrive quickly enough to totally change the near-term race. What about making the grid work better with the energy we do have?
Crucial point. The essay covers grid-enabling tech. Big focus on long-duration energy storage, LDES.
Storage longer than typical lithium-ion battery.
Exactly, 10 hours or more. Vital for smoothing out renewables, storing solar power for overnight, wind power for calm days. Enhances grid resilience, too. Lots of different LDES technologies. Pumped hydro, compressed air, thermal storage, flow batteries, hydrogen.
Huge need for this.
Immense! Projections show global needs in the terawatts by 2040, costing trillions. U.S. needs hundreds of gigawatts, too. Big push to get costs down. DOE targets, demo projects. But scaling up manufacturing and training workers are major hurdles.
What about better batteries themselves, beyond lithium-ion?
The essay discusses sodium-ion batteries. They're a leading contender. Potential for lower costs because sodium is abundant, energy density is improving, maybe better power delivery.
Cheaper than lithium.
Material costs could be 25–30% lower than common lithium types like LFP, but challenges remain. Matching lithium's energy density fully, anode costs, overall cost competitiveness. China's moving fast here. U.S. has research consortia working on it.
And solid-state batteries.
Mentioned briefly. Promise higher density, better safety, but still earlier stage, big manufacturing challenges to solve. So the overall point is grid tech like LDES and new batteries are essential enablers, but they also need development and scale up.
Right. So after covering the demand, the current supply, the expansion plans, and all these potential tech game changers, we come back to the core question. Does the essay think energy capacity is the deciding factor in the ASI race? What's the final verdict?
The conclusion is nuanced.
Yeah.
It says energy is absolutely necessary. It could definitely be a constraint, but it's unlikely to be the sole determinant of who wins the ASI race.
Necessary, but not sufficient on its own.
Exactly. It restates the evidence. Advanced AI needs immense power, so having enough reliable energy is just table stakes, a prerequisite. It acknowledges the U.S. strengths innovation, gas, nuclear, IRA funds, but also the big weakness, building infrastructure fast enough.
And China's strengths, speed, scale, manufacturing, UHV grid, but also weaknesses like coal reliance and maybe that AI research lag.
Precisely. The essay games out a scenario. What if ASI comes just from raw scaling, piling on more and more compute? In that case, China's speed in building infrastructure could be a huge advantage, while U.S. permitting bottlenecks are a major vulnerability.
But that's not the only possible path.
No. The counter-argument is, what if breakthroughs in energy efficiency happen? Smarter chips, neuromorphic, optical, better algorithms. That could shift the advantage back to innovation leaders like the U.S. Less about brute force energy, more about clever tech.
Or what if AI research itself changes direction?
Right. Maybe a paradigm shift towards less compute-intensive ways to get intelligence. Then research leadership becomes more important than just having the most megawatts.
And those new energy sources like fusion or geothermal.
Long-term potential, yes, but too uncertain in the near term to bet the farm on. They could change the game eventually, but probably not in the next decade, critical for this race. So the essay concludes, it's not just energy or algorithms, it's the whole ecosystem. Data access, AI talent education, immigration, capital investment. Those are still hugely important.
Plus the whole geopolitical backdrop driving energy security and tech decoupling.
Exactly. So the winner, the essay suggests, will be the nation that orchestrates progress across all these fronts, integrates energy policy with tech ambition, talent strategy, investment. The kilowatt race is critical, yes, but it's just one part of a much bigger marathon to ASI.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaway from our deep dive into the kilowatt race seems clear. Yes, having enough power is absolutely vital for the US-China ASI contest. You can't run these massive models without it. But it's not the whole story.
Not by a long shot.
It's one critical piece alongside breakthroughs in making AI itself more efficient, getting the data, having the skilled people, and having smart national strategies that pull it all together.
That's it. Energy is the fuel, but you still need the engine, the driver, the map, the whole package. It's about integrating everything effectively.
A really fascinating look at how deeply intertwined energy and AI have become. It definitely leaves you with a provocative thought, doesn't it? Considering how fast things change, how might some unforeseen breakthrough, maybe in AI efficiency, maybe a surprise in fusion or geothermal, totally scramble our current understanding of this kilowatt race in just a few years? What black swan event could suddenly shift the balance?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe trillion-dollar.
Something for all of us to keep watching closely. Thanks for breaking down the kilowatt race for us.
My pleasure. It's a critical topic.